All right, hi everyone. Thanks for making it out so late in the conference. I know you're probably all tired. Hopefully you're all caffeinated and ready to pay a little bit of attention. If you don't worry. I'll tell you what the takeaway is at the end. So if you want to fall asleep for the next 30 minutes or so, when I say this is a takeaway, this is when you can kind of doze in and pay attention to that one last part. Okay, so I'm going to start off with an introduction. My name is Naoufal. It's phonetically spelled Naoufal. So if you forget how to say it, if you go on my Twitter, it's sort of written everywhere. As you can imagine, I deal with this a lot. So this is what I look like on the internet. That's also what I looked like 5 years ago when I was a lot younger, didn't have a beard. Gant keeps telling me I need to get a new profile picture, and he's probably right. You probably know me from the open source community. I've done a few bridges for React Native, so React Native Touch ID or React Native Safari View Controller. So if you've used either of those, you might have seen this face around. And I also work for Netflix as a senior software engineer. So I'm willing to buy a beer to anyone who's seen this screen more than I have. If you watch Netflix, you've probably seen it a lot, but as you can imagine, I see this one a lot at work. And so I like to start every talk with just talking about a few shows I'm currently watching, and a few shows that you should probably watch too. And if you have, we should definitely chat about them later. So one of my favorites is Abstract, as you can tell from the t-shirt that I'm wearing. If you're into design, you'll love this. If you're not into design, it's a great way to connect with the designers at work. So you can watch a few of these episodes that were great. Another movie we came out with recently is Oksha. So it's a great movie about a young girl that goes to great lengths to save that pet animal that she has in the back. I also recommend this one. Everything up here I recommend, actually. Next one, Master of None, great TV show. It's modern romance meets Aziz Ansari. If you haven't seen it, watch it. Half of this season is actually set in Europe. I mean, you guys probably don't care, but it's pretty cool. So another one here is Icarus. So this one's actually about sports doping. So they go over kind of the Lance Armstrong scandal, also what happened during the Olympics. Also highly recommend it. And finally, this just came out last week, Narcos Season 3. So I don't know if you guys are into Narcos, but this one's really good. Somehow they managed to keep it going despite what happened at the end of Season 2. I'm not going to spoil it for those of you who haven't seen it. But you guys didn't come here to hear about TV. You guys came here to hear me talk about a special subject, right? So I'm here to talk to you about the most important topic in React Native, right? And that's clearly navigation, right? We're here to talk about navigation. Just kidding. We're here to talk about payments. But payments is actually pretty important, right? It's a very important topic, but I feel like we don't talk about it enough, right? Like our apps need to make money for us to be here. None of us would be here if we didn't get paid or if our companies didn't make money. And usually the revenue streams are either advertising or transactional, right? So at Netflix, for instance, everything starts with a user signing up. And when you sign up, you enter your credit card. If we don't get your credit card, then you're not using Netflix. Airbnb, at the end of the transaction, when you want to book your apartment, it's a transaction again. You need to enter your credit card information at least once. Uber is the same. And so anytime I start talking about payments, I like to quote a great computer scientist that said, "Cash rules everything around me." You're right, that's actually Wu-Tang. But it applies, right? It applies. Cash does rule everything around us. And so when I think about it, it's kind of interesting that we've neglected it for so long, right? We haven't innovated on payments a lot, despite how important it is. And so I decided to kind of look back at the history of digital payments to better understand how we got to where we got today. And so I want to share what I learned with you. And so we need to go all the way back to 1969. That's where it all started. Does anyone know what happened in 1969? Okay, that's a good one. What else happened for our industry, though? I didn't know either. I didn't know this until actually a week ago. So the ARPANET actually was invented. And it's so old, you can tell there's like an old logo. I couldn't find anything better. So that's sort of what I have to stick with. So the ARPANET was actually the first internet. It was for students to kind of share their ideas and have access to resources across the country in the US. And so a couple of years after this was invented, the first transaction online happened. And because only students were on the ARPANET, can you imagine what that first transaction was? What did you say back there? Weed? Someone said weed? You're right. It was weed. All right. So someone from Stanford bought some marijuana from someone at MIT, and it got shipped across the country. But that doesn't really count, right? Because the actual payment didn't happen online. that payment happened offline. And so to get the first actual online payment, we need to fast forward to 1989. So I'm going to ask you again, what do you think happened in 1989? What's that? Weed again? So actually, the internet was invented in 1989, right? This is Tim Berners-Lee, and he invented the internet. But it wouldn't be until 2 years after that that regular people like you and I could start surfing the internet. And so 3 years after that, in 1994, is when the first online purchase was made. Anyone want to guess what it was? Porn? Okay. I mean, that's a good guess. Online game. So Pizza Hut actually claims that the first purchase was a Pizza Hut pizza. But it wasn't. It was actually a Sting CD. And it was sold on a website called Netmarket. And the person that owned this was called Dan Kahn. And so a friend of his went on the website, entered his payment information into one of these, right? We still see these every day. This is a payment form. And so all of us in this room are very used to pressing this button, right? You go on a website, you add to cart, or you proceed to checkout, and we click these buttons, and we're used to it. We don't think about it too much. And what we usually see after this, again, is this payment form. And it can be long, sometimes it's short, it's usually long, and none of us actually like entering our credit card details. And I haven't met a lot of developers actually like implementing this payment form. Show of hands, how many people actually get really excited when they have to implement a checkout at work? We got one guy back there, we got two. You guys are probably the only two I've ever met. I personally don't like it, but we have to do it because, again, cash rules everything around us. And so in 2007, something huge happened, right? The iPhone was announced. An iPod, what was it? An iPod, a phone, and a revolutionary internet device or something like that. That's it. It's a communicator device. Internet communicator is what it was. And so after this happened, it started the smartphone revolution. Everyone got a smartphone. This guy got a smartphone, right? And he's frustrated because he's trying to buy something and he still has to fill out this payment form, right? And although although mobile traffic increased, and it still does today, mobile only accounts for a third of the purchases done online. So that means you're twice as likely to drop off on your mobile checkout. How many people here, show of hands, were about to buy something on their phone and they dropped off because the form was too long, or you said, I'll finish it later on desktop, and you didn't, right? We've all done this. And so the first, in my opinion, the first advancement that we made in payments was in 2011. And 2011 is when we got autofill, right? But autofill isn't perfect. Sometimes it'll miss an input. Sometimes you have multiple forms on a page, and it just doesn't work, right? You get one of these, and then you still need to go in and manually fill out that form. And so it wouldn't be until 2014 that we would really tackle, that we'd really propose an alternative to the payment form. And that was Apple Pay, right? And it's still not everywhere. And so for those of you that don't know, Apple Pay is a way to store your credit cards, and you can share this payment information across different apps. You don't have to enter it multiple times. And you can make a purchase with a tap of a single button. So this is huge. This is the first time that we can make purchases in different applications without re-entering this payment information. And so the next year, actually before that, so it took us 20 years. 20 years to really figure out that the payment form wasn't good enough or to innovate on it. And meanwhile, we did a lot of things like service workers and all these cool other features, but at the end of the day, cash rules everything around us, and it took us 20 years to do it. And so next year, Google says, me too. They say, okay, we got Android Pay. This is great for everyone, right? We're heading in the right direction. That's what it looks like. And so last year, something huge happened on the web. And that was the announcement of something called a Payment Request API. And so the Payment Request API is sort of like Apple Pay and Android Pay, right? It's a way to have a one-touch purchase on any given website. You enter your credit card information once, and instead of filling out a form, this dialog can come out. And so this is currently available on Chrome for Android, Edge, and the Samsung browser. And all the major browsers are actually on board for this standard. It's actually a standard API. And so Firefox is working on it, and Safari is as well. And actually, as of earlier this week, it's available in Chrome desktop. So it's impeccable timing for my talk. So if you want to go online and try it out, if you're on your computer, you can do this as well. Again, I see you back there on your computer. You should try it. And so you're probably wondering, I'm sure some of you are wondering, why is this guy standing up here talking to us about a web API, right? I bought a ticket to React Native Europe, not React Web Europe. When you went on the website, Mike told you this is the first conference in the world to focus on anything and everything React Native. No web, no backend, or general purpose docs. We've seen it already. And he even signed it. And so the reason I'm here today is to talk to you about a library that I've been working on called React Native Payments. And so React Native Payments is actually built on top of this web standard. It's built on top of the payment request API. And it provides you with a way to charge your customers with Apple Pay, and as of today, Android Pay. It also allows you to request contact information from a user without using a form. It allows you to request shipping addresses as well. And if you're using a payment processor, you can use that as well to then charge your customers. And so today, I want to give you an overview of how the payment request API works, because in this case, it does apply to us in React Native. I then want to show you how you can use the payment request API with Apple Pay, then Android Pay. Then I want to show you how we can now write cross-platform payments code because we're using a common API across all these different platforms. And then to top it off, we'll do a quick demo just to show you how fast we can actually integrate payments in our applications. Okay, so let's start off with a payment request API. Let's see what it looks like. Just do a quick recap again. As I said earlier, this is a web standards API. It's an evolution to autofill, so you can look at it as it'll take the same information that you have in autofill on the web. In our case for React Native, we're going to use the Apple Pay information that you have saved and the Android Pay information that you have saved. And all this does is once the user accepts to pay you, you'll get a beautiful object that will return the payment data. And this payment data can vary from one source to another. So if you're using credit card on web, you'll get a certain shape. If you're using Apple Pay, you'll get a token. If you're using Android Pay, you'll get a token. If you're using a processor, you might get a Stripe token. Okay, so let's look at what the code looks like for a payment request on the web. Right, so it's very simple. We have a 29-liner here. So let's go through it section by section to kind of understand what happens. Okay, so if we start off, I can sort of cut off over there, but first thing you need is your payment method data. So on the web, we'll just say that we want to accept any basic card. So here we're looking at any debit card or credit card will be accepted in this case. Next up, you need to define the different list items that you have. So in this case, if you want to sell a movie ticket, we'll just define it up here. We'll stick a label on it and an amount. And the amount is always an object that takes a currency and a value. After that, you want to define your total. So the developer is in charge of doing all the math. So say you had multiple display items, it's up to you to add them together and then have a total that represents that. And that total is what the user will be charged. Once you have these two, you stick them inside of the details object, and then you call the payment request API in a beautiful imperative API, just like the way Andre likes it. And then when you want to show it to the user, you call payment request.show, which is a promise that will resolve when the user accepts to pay, when they press that pay button or when they authenticate with Touch ID or Touch on Android. And what you'll get is a payment response, so this will be the credit card details or a token. So let's look at what this, let's see what that looks like inside the browser. So here we've created the payment request. When we call show, this thing pops up with everything that we've listed. And then when the user hits pay, that promise will resolve and you'll get that object with the credit card information. On the web, you'll get the full credit card number. You'll get everything that you would expect from a form that you can then send to your server. Okay? So let's see how we do this with Apple Pay, using payment requests again. All right, so the API doesn't change. It's the exact same, 34 lines, and the only reason it's longer is because what we're updating is the method data, right? So here, the supported method, instead of being basic card, we're calling Apple Pay. And then we'll give it a data object. So here, you'll pass your merchant ID and anything specific to Apple Pay. And the rest of the example is the same. And so let's look at what that would look like inside of our iOS app. Right? We just get Apple Pay here. Pay with passcode because I'm in the simulator. Otherwise, you'd have a Touch ID. And so for Android, again, as you can imagine, it's pretty much the same. Right? Same example. The only thing that changes is the method data. Here, Android Pay. And then the data object is slightly different, again, configured for Android Pay. And then let's look at what that looks like. Right, so the interface is a little bit different because we're calling those native APIs. And so what React Native Payments does for you is it provides you with a polyfill for the payment request API, and then does bridging for the respective platforms. And so you might have noticed that the method data is an array, right? It's an array that takes objects, configuration objects. And what that means is that it actually enables us to share our payments code. We can actually have cross-platform payments code. And the way that we do that is by providing multiple payment methods, right? And so in this example here, we have our Apple Pay config, followed by an Android config. And then on Chrome for Android, you can actually call Android Pay directly in your browser. So that's what this configuration here is. And then the last one is a basic card that we saw in the first example. And then all we have to do is stick them all inside of our method data, and the rest of the example remains the same. And so what's going to happen here is, depending on the platform will go through each one of these payment data, all these different payment methods, and the first one that matches is what's going to be used. Right? And so this example here on the web would look like this, right? Because the only one that matches is basic credit card. On iOS, the Apple Pay payment method is the one that would match. And then on Android Pay, on Android, we'd have Android Pay. And so let's see, a demo of what this actually looks like, right? And here we have 100% code share. And so let's play a quick video of it on the web on the left, and then iOS on the right. If you have an Android phone, you can go to this URL right here, and you can test it within your browser. If you're on your computer, Gant, that's you can go to this URL over here, rnp.nof.me. It's not actually going to charge you. You can trust me. I'll show you why it won't in the next slide. All right, and then here we have an example with a shipping address, and as you can see, it pops up, it populates the shipping method that the user can then select. And so if you're on Chrome and it says payment request not available, you just need to update your browser. As of 6.1, which was released on Monday, it should work. And so what happens after this is you get a payment response. That's what we saw inside of our, after the pr.show, we had a promise that resolved. That gave you a payment response. And that varies from payment method to payment method. Right? And so let's look at what we do with the code. Once you get this payment response, and there's a bug in this code, can anyone find it? So line 41 says payment request. It should actually be payment response because we call line 47. But anyway, let's just assume there wasn't a bug and payment request is actually payment response. Inside payment response, you'll have a details object. And depending on your platform, it'll hold different things. On Apple Pay, it'll be a token. Android Pay will be the same. On the web, you'll have credit card details. And so the payment request API doesn't do any payment processing for you. It'll just give you that data, and then you send it to your server. Right? You'll post it into your server, and then based on the response from your own server, you can call payment request.complete to show a check mark. Or if there was an error for some reason and you want to dismiss the payment request, you call payment request.fail, or failure, actually. So I spoke about payment processors real quick, so let's see how we would do that, right? I assume most of you probably use something like Braintree or Stripe. And so React Native Payments actually has support for that. All right, so we have support for Stripe and Braintree, and there's a pluggable API if you ever need your own payment processor, like authorize.net or Adyen or something like that. And so when it comes to actually configuring a payment processor, not much changes, right? The work that we do to change our payment methods always happens within the method data array. And so in this case, we're just going to add a payment method tokenization parameters. We'll say that we want a gateway token. So instead of receiving an Apple Pay token, we're receiving a Stripe token. And we'll add our configuration, right? So you guys might be familiar with a Stripe publishable key. So you just stick that in there. And now the result of the payment response would actually be a Stripe token. You send that to your server and charge as you're used to doing. All right, so I've been talking a lot about how this is easy. So I guess I'll put my money where my mouth is, and I'll do a quick demo and just show you how we can get started from 0 to accepting payments inside of an iOS application. So we've all done this before. We've all used React Native init. So we'll create a quick application. I'll skip through that. I'll skip through that real quick because none of you see, none of you guys need to actually see me install all the dependencies. Next up, we'll install React Native Payments. So it's available on NPM under React Native Payments. We'll go ahead and install that, and we will not wait for it. Next up, because we have native dependencies, we'll have to link them. So shout out to the RNPM guys for React Native link. So once we're linked, we'll have a few more steps. For Apple Pay, you'll have to jump into Xcode. This is the only time you'll have to jump into Xcode with this module. And this is to actually activate your merchant ID and enable Apple Pay. So to do that, you jump into the capabilities of your application. You go down to Apple Pay. You flip that switch on, and you select the merchant ID that you need to create on the Apple developer website. And from this point forward, you can get back to your JS. You don't have to touch Xcode or any native code. If you're on Android, there's actually one more step as well. In this case, you jump into your Android manifest file, and you just want to enable the Wallets API. And that's it. Now we can finally get back to where we're comfortable. We'll go back to our JavaScript. So we'll do a quick live coding session that I've pre-recorded. Otherwise, it'd be bug-prone live. And so here we're just going to quickly add a button. If you're still using, touchable highlight with a text inside, it's probably time to switch to button. It took me too long to switch over as well. So we'll give it a quick label, and then it also takes press handler. And now that we have that set up, let's go ahead and require the payment request library. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to require it globally just to replicate the browser behavior. So in your browser, it'll be available on window. So here we're going to set it on global. And now inside of our press handler, we're going to do exactly what I showed you in the other slides. So here we're going to create our method data. So in this case, the supported method is Apple Pay because we're on iOS. And we could have multiple of these in this example, and it would only pick up the Apple Pay. And so the merchant ID that we used earlier within Xcode that we generated on the Apple developer website is the one that we're going to put here. It's very important that they match up. Otherwise, the Apple Pay tokenization will not work. And after that, we have some configuration that we can add. So if you only want to accept Visa and MasterCard and Amex and exclude any other credit card, you can do it this way. And now if you were to call payment request.canMakePayments and the user had Diners Club, it would return false. Otherwise, it would return true. And that's how you would know to proceed with a payment or not prior to showing the Apple Pay dialog. And you specify your country code and currency. And like before, here we're going to charge for a movie ticket. So we'll add a label along with an amount, which will be in USD. And it's not a very expensive ticket. It'll be about $15 compared to the $32 ticket that we bought earlier. So again, total, we have to do this manually. If we had multiple display items, say you had 2 movie tickets, you would have to add those up yourself. You would have to have a function that maybe takes 2 amounts. In that case, they wouldn't be strings, right? They would be numbers. You would add them up and then pass that over to your total. You can pass a string or a number there. And as we saw before, we'll take both of these, we'll put them inside of a details object, and then we're nearly done. So I think we started this demo maybe about 5 minutes ago. So hopefully we can make it under 10 and have Apple Pay be, production ready. And so finally we call payment request.show, which is at the end of our press handler. And the reason all this happens inside of the handler is because you can only call show once on a payment request. And so if the user were to press it twice, it needs to be, you need to create a new payment request every time. And so let's try it out. And that's it. So earlier I told you after a server call, we could make it fail. So you just have to update the argument that you pass into failure. So that's what's happening on that example that I told you, the rnp.nauf.me. It's just calling success. And that's it. So in under 10 minutes, we're able to use Payment Request API to accept payments without even coding a form, dealing with input validation, or any of that. And so if there's anything I want you to take away from this talk, so earlier when I said use sleepers, okay, it's time to wake up now. This is what I want you to remember. Okay, so the takeaway here is the next time you need to implement a checkout form or any payment form for your company or any payment solution, before just reaching for a form right away, just know that now you have other options, right? In the coming year, payment request is going to pick up steam and it's going to become a lot more common. And so now you have an option of just writing a 30-liner and calling it done in 15 minutes and going home at 5 p.m., if not earlier, right? And so hopefully React Native Payments can help pave the way towards like a future without any payment forms at all. So thank you. That was it for me. I'm at Naoufal on Twitter, on GitHub. If you want to chat about payments later or anything Netflix related, like TV, hopefully Narcos. I saw there were a lot of fans here. I'll be happy to talk about it later. I'll be outside right after this talk. Thank you.